Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy is absolutely fantastic, in more ways than one. Not only is every film in the series a display of phenomenal writing and filmmaking, they are also reflective of many of the liberal fantasies that have permeated American culture in the past few decades. The first film of the series, Batman Begins, was written by Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer, starting in March of 2003. It was released in June of 2005. The film was written at the onset of the war in Iraq, following both the September 11th attacks on the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, and more importantly to the topic at hand, a fear-mongering media narrative involving weaponized anthrax and the chance of certain leaders from the Arab world being responsible for the deployment of said anthrax, maybe being the true masterminds behind the 9/11 attacks, and potentially harboring weapons of mass destruction far more dangerous than either of these. The film yet again sought to tell the origin story of the iconic superhero Batman, this time opting to portray Bruce Wayne as being trained by a mysterious international ninja terrorist group named the League of Shadows in the snowy mountains of Bhutan, a country located between China and India. Probably because having this group be based out of Iraq or Afghanistan would have been too on the nose. But don't worry, for good measure, the shadowy leader of this terrorist group bent on destroying an American metropolitan city that definitely isn't New York has a 100% Arabic name, Ra's al Ghul. Once Bruce Wayne grows out of favor with this ninja Al-Qaeda group because of his unwillingness to kill people by means more direct than his usual criminal negligence, he remigrates to his hometown of Gotham, where he uses his benevolent billionaire father's vast wealth and resources to dress up as a bat and scare criminals. This eventually puts him on the trail of a certain Dr. Crane, a psychiatrist at the local asylum who has a tendency to put on a scarecrow mask while he treats his patients with an airborne weaponized hallucinogenic drug he's getting shipped in from Ninja Al-Qaeda, whose plan is to eventually supply Crane with enough of this drug that he can saturate Gotham's water supply with it, after which Ra's al Ghul will use a unique, never-before-seen weapon of mass destruction to evaporate all of the water in Gotham, releasing the drug into the air and destroying the city. As a background to all of this, we see that Gotham's legal system is thoroughly corrupted by organized crime, but these corrupt elements are eventually revealed as subordinate to and later victims of the much more dangerous and malevolent League of Shadows. The second film in the series, The Dark Knight, portrays the rise of a terrorist who calls himself the Joker, whose main goal is to cause enough terror in the city of Gotham that Batman is forced to unmask himself, revealing his identity to the public and presumably being brought to justice by the legal system he works alongside. The film came out in 2008, at the very end of the Bush presidency, whose politics and culture were so fundamental to the first film in the series, and which continue to inform the plot and aesthetics of the second. Once again, we have a villain who isn't motivated by any personal gain, be it the drive for power or money or anything else. Just like the League of Shadows in Batman Begins, the Joker of this film is motivated exclusively by his desire to cause chaos, to undermine the foundations of the status quo through not only violence, like the League of Shadows before him, but also through the use of a far more dangerous weapon, through the use of the truth. With the backdrop of questions emerging regarding the true identity of the perpetrators of the September 11th attacks, the revelation that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, public knowledge of the atrocious crimes committed against prisoners in Abu Ghraib, it isn't hard to see how in many ways the established order of American society in the real world was also being threatened by the truth, and how willing that same establishment was, and is, to compound lie on top of lie in order to secure its rule. In the same way, Gotham's establishment throughout The Dark Knight finds itself precariously perched on increasing levels of deception, the first of which is the very existence of Batman himself. An existence which has secured Gotham against much of the crime that plagued it in Batman Begins, but which is based off the anonymity of the true identity of the Batman. An anonymity that, if shattered, would rob the city of the good Batman has done for it. Later in the film, when the public begins to demand that Batman reveal himself so that the Joker's crime spree will come to an end, District Attorney Harvey Dent falsely claims that he is the Batman in order to buy the real Batman time to track down Joker. At another point in the film, Police Commissioner Gordon fakes his own death, traumatizing his wife and children, so that he can seize an opportunity to save Batman from being unmasked by the Joker. These two lies serve to prop up the initial lie upon which Batman's authority over the criminal element in Gotham rests. But the climax of the film sets up yet another lie, one in which Batman must sacrifice his public image as a crime fighter, taking upon himself the blame for the murders committed by Harvey Dent after the death of his fiancée in an effort to get back at the corrupt police system that betrayed him to the Joker. Also that the criminals that were put away under the Dent Act, as it will be referred to by in The Dark Knight Rises, will stay behind bars. These lies all serve the interests of the legal and political establishment of Gotham. Despite its consistent corruption, despite the violent vigilante that defends it, and most importantly, despite the methods said vigilante uses that violate international and domestic legal norms, that if committed by a regular officer of the law would have any case that rested upon these methods thrown out of the courtroom. Such as the torturing of the Joker for information, the kidnapping of a Chinese national from Hong Kong and his transportation back to Gotham for criminal trial, and the mass secret surveillance of the entirety of Gotham City in an effort to locate the Joker. The third film in the series, The Dark Knight Rises, tells the story of a masked mercenary named Bane operating out of the sewers and recruiting Gotham's most vulnerable and poor youth, eventually leading an armed uprising against the corrupt government and police department. One of the tools Bane uses to consolidate power for himself involves a letter written by Commissioner Gordon, directed towards the people of Gotham that reveals the truth of the Harvey Dent case that occurred 8 years before. A letter that Gordon did not have the nerve to actually make public on his own. Bane uses this letter as a pretext to break all of the prisoners who Dent put away out of prison, revealing the lie upon which the stability of Gotham City has been rested. Unbeknownst to the citizens of Gotham, Bane's true intentions involve blowing up a nuclear bomb inside of the city. A bomb that was made out of a nuclear reactor that was built by Wayne Enterprise at the behest of the daughter of Ninja Al-Qaeda leader Saddam Osama bin Ras Al Ghul, and transformed into a bomb by a Russian doctor with an Indian last name. Bane is portrayed as your typical populist dictator. Big coat, big speeches where he makes appeals to the people and systems of oppression. His insurgency starts in the sewers of Gotham and is staffed by orphans, homeless people, and brown people, the establishment's worst fear. Earlier in the film, a thief named Selina Kyle confides in Batman her understanding that eventually the rich and powerful of Gotham will meet face to face with a storm that will shatter the world they have taken for granted. A storm that is the direct result of the very lies they use to maintain their privilege. After Bane's uprising, in a scene wherein many of Gotham's poor are seen occupying an upper-class Gotham residency, Selina is found by her friend to be distraught about the situation. Her friend is understandably confused as to why someone who has always talked about this very scenario now suddenly seems full of regret. Her regret stems not from any spontaneous understanding that the storm she has often dreamed of is taking a form which she doesn't approve of. Presumably, she still believes that what is occurring in the scene is not unjust or unfair to the wealthy whose property is being reappropriated, but rather her regret stems from her understanding, due to her prior relationship with Bane, that the actual motives of what is transpiring are not as they appear to be. She sees that, though on the surface, yes, Gotham's poor and disenfranchised are now seeing their day in the sun in spite of the wealthy, the true end of this emancipatory venture is in fact only the total destruction of the city as a whole. We can infer that many of the poor, unadopted orphans that are shown to comprise some portion of Bane's early recruits are of the same opinion, without understanding the true ends that Bane is seeking to accomplish. True knowledge of the plan belonging only to Bane, the League of Shadows, and Thalia Al Ghul, daughter of Ra's al Ghul and member of the wealthy, socialite upper class that Selena Kyle dreams of toppling over. The film implicitly tells us that in spite of the appeals to populism made by any movement or any leader, at the head of all these movements and behind all of these leaders, there is, more likely than not, a shadowy and wealthy elite bent entirely on death and destruction. The film even calls into question the sincerity of wealthy liberals who claim to want to improve the world with their money, Thalia being a part of Bruce Wayne's business dealings, and using the justification of clean energy and nuclear power for Gotham as the basis for the construction of what will become the nuke that threatens to destroy the city and everyone in it. This is an ideological development in relation to the previous films, wherein the Wayne family is constantly glorified for their liberal activism. From Bruce's great-grandfather using what would become the Batcave as a place to harbor runaway slaves on behalf of the Underground Railroad, to Thomas Wayne's medical work and his efforts to improve Gotham public transportation through the building of the massive monorail we see in Batman Begins, to Bruce Wayne himself becoming a masked crime fighter. Consistently, the Wayne family's exploits are portrayed as just and noble, while all other members of Gotham's upper class are portrayed as corrupt at best, and at worst, in the case of Thalia Al Ghul, literally bent on nuking the entire city, herself included. The realization of the League of Shadows being behind the events of The Dark Knight Rises places the Joker in The Dark Knight as the odd man out, him having no association with Ninja Al-Qaeda at all. He is also different in that in Batman Begins, the main antagonist Ra's al Ghul knows the true identity of Batman, just as the main antagonist of The Dark Knight Rises, Bane, is also revealed to have the same knowledge. The Joker, on the other hand, bases his entire plan off of a desire to attain this very knowledge. He wants to see Batman unmasked for who he really is, while the other two villains have goals far beyond this, due to them already being privy to this information. In this light, three factions begin to emerge. On the one side, we have Batman and the elements of the police force that remain uncorrupted by organized crime, who primarily seek to defend the existing institutions of Gotham City from this corruption. We have the League of Shadows, partnering with organized crime and the general population when it is useful, with the primary intention of destroying Gotham and all of its institutions along with it. And in the last faction, the Joker, who also partners with organized crime when it is useful to him, and also calls upon the general population when it is useful to him. Examples being when he calls for the Wayne Enterprise employee who wants to out Bruce Wayne as being Batman to be murdered, and the public flocks to do just that. In between all of these factions, we have organized crime and the general population, whose allegiance vacillates. The former primarily being allied with the League of Shadows and the Joker, and the latter siding mostly with Batman and the police, only opposing them when either of the antagonistic factions make appeals directly to them, in the aforementioned case with the Joker and Wayne Enterprise employee, and also for the majority of Bane's coup. The third film climaxes not with the people of Gotham recognizing the true intentions of Bane. If anything, we can assume most of them are still partying in rich people's houses. It actually comes when the police reorganize themselves and wage a massive street battle against Bane and his mercenaries. The majority of citizens remain tucked away in their homes, presumably ambivalent to the outcome of this massive battle, or, as the party in the rich folks' home seems to imply, actually rooting for Bane and his insurgents. Similarly, the press conference scene in The Dark Knight, wherein the media calls for Batman to capitulate to the Joker and reveal himself, along with the scene wherein the mob of people attempt to kill Wayne Enterprise employee on behalf of the Joker, at the very least, reflect that the people of Gotham are not as committed to maintaining the anonymity of Batman as Batman himself and the establishment are. The difference between Bane and the Joker could also be delineated by the different natures of their respective form and substance. Form referring to the means by which the substance of their efforts is acted upon. The substance of what the Joker wants center around unmasking Batman for who he really is, to reveal to the city and to Batman himself not only Batman's true identity, but also the ways in which Batman is similar to the existing corrupt establishment and how he serves their interests. The substance of Bane's efforts, on the other hand, center only around the total destruction of Gotham, its corrupt institutions, and Batman himself. The first of these, the substance of the Joker's actions, is one wherein the citizens of Gotham are shown to, at the very least, not oppose. While all of the citizens of Gotham would undoubtedly oppose the true nature of Bane's actions were they privy to them. The form of these two villains' motives, though, also differ. Joker's actions taking the form of violent guerrilla terrorism, something which the people of Gotham inevitably oppose, themselves and their loved ones being some of the primary targets of this terrorism, while Bane's actions take on the form of populist political insurgency, a form which gives him the general support of the population. In one instance, the form is opposed while the substance is supported. In the other, the substance is opposed while the form is supported. And in this way, one positive form is associated with a negative substance, i.e., Bane's nuclear bomb with populist uprising, and in the other, the positive substance is associated with a negative form, in the example of Joker's desire to reveal the truth with domestic terrorism. The lessons from both are clear. Those who look as though they support the people have secret motives that actually hurt the people, and those who actually share the same desires of the people will tend to use methods that end up harming the people, or will go too far with their crusade and eventually harm the people. The only option being left for the people is to side with the existing corrupt establishment and their corrupt institutions.